The Bureau XCOM Declassified is telling the secret origin story of the XCOM organization that has never been told before. We're going back in time to the 60s, where the initial alien threat has come to invade, and the player is going to take the role of Agent William Carter and defend both XCOM organization itself and our nation and ultimately the world against this threat. This is all played out over a game that has an emphasis on third-person, squad-based tactical combat with a very fine level of control. So you're doing coordinated team tactics with your group of agents that you customize and recruit, known in 3D space to like which you haven't done in real time before. To this degree, you're able to issue complex movement orders, you rank them up. It's all about me and my small team of guys fighting this alien threat using tactics. The goals in 2010 with the shooter sort of expression of our XCOM game are not too dissimilar from where we are today, but at the highest level, it was trying to find the tenets of the classic XCOM recipe and put it to a sort of different mix for modern gamers. The biggest things that were lacking was a sense of team. XCOM is a game that's generally about a unit, a squad of people out in the battlefield working together. And although there were 2 AI companions, your control over them, your interaction with them from a gameplay and mechanical standpoint was pretty limited. They were mostly like autonomous turret AI buddies, not really something that you could command and control. It was also sort of trying to get a little more visceral on the action front. With the first-person perspective, the weapon set was much more sort of a mixture of cerebral investigation with quick moments of panic and tension.
The game of XCOM back in 2010 was really a kind of a detective story. A story about investigation, about exploration of these strange, almost inscrutable aliens that are unknowable. And we wanted to make the game match that vibe, so it had a very kind of a private Dick, kind of a Dick Tracy kind of thing going on with it.
I think it was a little more closer to that sort of survival horror of like a Silent Hill sort of game, where it's sort of the cerebral horror versus the run and gun horror game. Though horror and terror is an aspect of the XCOM franchise, like it's definitely, you get scared when you're playing XCOM. It's not, I don't think, at the forefront, and that game was emphasizing it way too strongly. But it quickly led to us remembering that a lot of XCOM had to do with team tactics and combat and fighting a war, not just snapping pictures. And so we quickly moved past that onto the expression of the franchise that we have now in the Bureau XCOM Declassified. Transitioning from 2010 to 2011, the big evolutions where we sort of started to iterate the epiphanies, the oh yes ideas, was the emphasis on small unit tactics and squad tactics. My agents in the field are somebody that I both build up, that I control, that I have a high level of tactical control over their disposition on the battlefield. Go here, do this, as well as very granular control, like the same sort of control you have on the turn-based top-down isometric XCOM of very specific, take this flank, move in this way, set up this covering fire situation. That was a big evolution from where we were at in 2010. The interface at the time, dubbed TAC mode, now called Battle Focus, was another big jump. Not just the ability to control the agents like this, but have an interface that harkened to that God's eye perspective to a degree on the battlefield, like really looked and felt like XCOM, albeit a real-time expression, which was our creative charter all along, like find an expression of these core franchise pillars in real time, in a genre that's a little more modern than turn-based, to see if we can find audience and fans that like XCOM want to experience it in a different way, or may never have played the classic XCOM, but we could be their on-ramp onto it.
The aliens in the 2010 version of XCOM were all abstract. The huge obelisk titan, the gooey blob, the ghost, other ones that weren't even seen that were also pretty abstract as well. And for this game, we were moving to more of a kind of a tactical game. And those enemies really didn't fit that kind of mechanic. We wanted something that really could play almost on more of an equal footing with us as we're fighting this kind of squad, Carter and his agents against a squad of aliens. And we needed enemies that could actually go along with that. XCOM's always been about this menagerie of aliens, the sectoids, the mutons, silicoids, what have you. And we wanted to play homage to that and really live in that universe. And that was just towards the evolution of a greater species. We created the Outsiders, who are basically this really horribly militant, savage race that was going around the galaxy basically enslaving other races. They're a race that is all about consumption. They're not sustainable at all, and they're basically Earth is our next target.
Between the showing in 2010 and 2011, we moved the calendar forward, transitioning from the 50s to the 60s. We wanted to move away from this portrayal of the Rockwell 50s to a time period that was a little more ripe to have conflict. The Cold War looming up, the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. We could play a little bit more with sounds and songs of the period. Obviously, if you look for movies like The Right Stuff, which is NASA, starting off trying to get into space, like that was in the 60s. Kennedy's challenge to go to the moon was in the 60s. Some people responded to the 50s and had a hard time distinguishing it between the 40s. We felt the 60s was a sort of a good narrative springboard to accomplish what we wanted to, and gave us a great visual backdrop where we could have this America leaving its heyday right on the precipice of change, now attacked and corrupted and transformed by an alien threat.
During the period from the 50s to the 60s, both are really great periods. But for us, we were super excited about that idea of the Cold War. And I'm a huge James Bond fan, and just getting some of that cool NASA era tech in there. We also wanted to bring in some of that great kind of space era stuff to our buildings as well. It's kind of a Googie style is what it's called. It really has this strong sort of futuristic kind of vibe that hints at that sort of space age, that space race that we had going on in the 60s.
In 2011, we showed the more tactical focus, the emphasis of me and my squad mates, and it was a hybrid mixture of the first person that we'd previously shown for player navigation and player combat, and third person control over Carter and his agents in the field. We quickly decided that the third person gave numerous advantages, which is why we did it tactically. I could see myself, I could see my teammates, I could see the enemy, I could see the layout of the land. I had all the information I needed to build a nice plan of attack and then have it executed. So we said goodbye to first person and its lovely disembodied hands and weapons, and hello to third person and Carter and all of his fedora glory with tactical combat awareness, living and dying with his squad.
The thing I liked about it is even just from the basic idols, being able to convey some of the character of Carter in third person. You know, being able to see him like smoke a cigarette or drink from his flask. It's a really quick little way to get into his character right from the bat, you know, without having to do anything much more than just this little animation. And I also just love it just from the point of view of really being a story more about Carter, because you see him all the time. You're really aware of him and his squad together, working together, and you got to really see what he's doing, and you're thinking of himself as Carter, a character, not just less of a cipher and more of like, this is a real guy who has his flaws, his errors, and that those flaws come into play throughout the course of the narrative. He generally is pretty much the same kind of 40s-ish, kind of Don Draper-ish kind of guy. The main thing that changed with him was his outfit and his style. He went from being more Rockwell-inspired to more of a more realistic, a little more grim. The Carter of today, he's an alcoholic, you know, kind of a career government man who's seen some really tough things in his life. His story starts with a kind of a bit of regret, you know, and he's really capable, but has a darkness to him.
Oh, Christ! Hold fire.
During the course of development, we have changed the scale and the scope of what the alien threat, what the invasion looks like. In 2010, it was very much in the backyards. It was hidden in the suburbs. It was a war that was happening in the shadows, with the front of the houses, the facade of normalcy being in place, but then peel back that wallpaper and strange things are afoot. In 2011, we went more classic sci-fi alien invasion, get the military together, send out the tanks, we're going to go repel, a little more Mars attacks. So what we've done with the Bureau XCOM Declassified is try to find a middle ground between the two that fit both our narrative goals and just felt a little cooler. So we're fighting in the suburbs, off the grid, off of main Route 66 cities out in New Mexico, or a little bit in the sleepy college town in Georgia. We're fighting here on replaced farmhouses that are fronts for hidden nuclear missile silos, sort of these easily identified Americana places, but enough off the main path that it will make a little bit sense when players experience the story of how these things could get erased from the history books, covered up, or if not, were never reported in the first place.
In 2011, you saw the university level, and it went through quite a change over the course of the last couple of years. That game back then was more about military threat, and it's more of like the sort of slow growth of the alien race coming to our world and slowly creeping in to invade us. This one's kind of this more blitzkrieg war, where they kind of surprise us, take us off guard. And what you see in this version of University in 2013 is a massacre. They were caught totally off guard in the midst of a homecoming parade, and what you see there is people being strung up by this horrible goo hanging from light posts. Is this really a grim scene that's a lot darker, and it sort of conveys the tone shift that happened.
The power ramp has changed in terms of what tools the player is going to use in the battlefield. In 2010, we were focused primarily on weapons, both classic bullet-based weapons and high-tech technology like a lightning thrower gun, as well as cool gimmick things like a goo compass that would point you to the location of blobs, and a high-tech camera for the investigation. Our joke has been before that we're trying to make XCOM not X-Files, and so moving things more militaristic has been a goal. So now you're able to level up yourself and your agents and then assign new offensive powers, things like deploying turrets, telekinetic lifts, pulse wave pushes, group flashbang attacks that stun, basically tools that the player can wield in the field of battle to both create tactical opportunities and respond to the tactical threat that the enemy gives them in a way that lets them really orchestrate what happens on the battlefield. With its rechristening as the Bureau, XCOM Declassified, it both helps establish itself as a different slant on the XCOM universe. It gives a very strong upfront indicator of we are an origin story, which in the course of our game, we're in an organization, a bureau, as it were, that makes the transition from something dedicated to terrestrial foreign threats to extraterrestrial foreign threats, and rechrists itself XCOM. From the get-go in the box, that name sort of houses it. And for us represents, like I said, this different slant, something that people can go, oh, it's that version of an XCOM game versus some sort of replacement to the franchise. In 2010, the expression of the agents that we had then, they were narrative characters. They had names, they had personalities. Like every game that has narrative characters, that meant they were untouchable in terms of their ability to die because, well, we had cutscenes to tell with them and they had to be around. When we moved away from that to get back to agents and the management of an agent roster as the player's responsibility, we changed them from being characters from a plot perspective to characters of the player's own creation, which has then made them a little more mortal. So as we transitioned away from 2011's E3, we started to have discussions about the mortality of agents. Would we emulate aspects of classic XCOM, which is the concept of permadeath, like someone can die on the field and they're not coming back. We felt like that was a strong pillar of the franchise, a little scary expression because people don't generally do that in the third-person space, but we felt since we were liberated to do it, we should start to try it out and went, yep, we're gonna own permadeath, we're gonna balance towards this. And we're going to make a game that's going to be pretty hardcore in what it demands of the player and ultimately what it rewards from the player's skill.